Welcome back, Electrology enthusiasts. This is part 2 of our deep dive on the follicle science, the episode that answers the question we all hear: why does hair seem so resilient? If you listened last week, then you know we built the foundation. Tonight, we're taking it home.
Today, we're closing the loop on Melissa's brilliant questions about follicle regeneration and what electrolysis actually destroys. This is one of the most important conversations we've recorded yet. So settle in, take a breath, and let's get nerdy together.
Hello, everybody.
All right, good evening. Welcome back.
Every time I'm like, guess who's back? Back again.
It's us. We're the ones that are back.
We are. We are not shady. Well, tonight we are starting part 2 of a conversation we had last week. So let's talk about it, because we have a lot to say in a little bit of time.
That's right. That's right. So before we get into the new content, let's revisit some of the key points from last week's episode. So it was titled, right, creatively, The Life and Death of a Hair. That's a book too, right?
It is.
Okay.
By an electrologist. Yeah. I own a copy of it. Very good.
Is it good? Yeah, it's a good book. All right. Yeah. So there you go. Free advertising for you. Life and Death of Hair.
You're welcome.
So
no extra.
Right? We won't charge you. So we explored the follicle as a true mini organ. And that means that it has nerves, it has blood vessels, it has hormone receptors, stem cell reservoirs, and it makes it a really deeply complex and beautifully engineered piece of our body.
Unit. Yeah. I think we love the fact that we tackled Melissa's questions. And by the way, Melissa, I know that you're here today. So if at any point you're like, and you want to put it in the comments, please feel free to keep dropping them in, because it does help kind of with us expanding the thought more. But your big question that we kicked off with last week was if the outer root sheath contains basal cells that can regenerate, are we creating new follicles? The question drove us into the anatomy of the bulge, the outer root sheath, the matrix, the papilla, the inner and outer root sheaths of the area, and the structures that all electrologists must understand when we're talking about permanence.
And we also clarified a fairly major myth, which is that electrolysis does not create new follicles. Humans are born with all the follicles that they will ever have, which is actually around 5 million, give or take a few.
Yeah, just
so. What clients actually perceive as new hair is usually due to hormone activation, vellus to terminal conversion, dormant follicles entering anagen, or paradoxical hypertrichosis.
Oh, yeah. And our big takeaway was that permanence isn't about removing the follicle. It's about destroying the follicle's regenerative androgens in that space. So when we disable the papilla, the matrix, the bulge, outer root sheath, germinative cells over multiple cycles, the follicle cannot rebuild.
And so that set the stage for tonight. Let's talk a little bit about why hair seems so resilient.
Oh, goodness. The full exploration of the follicular survival and its mechanisms. So let's ask the question that frustrates electrologists and clients alike. Whether you're a newbie, been at this for a minute, and you've heard it from your new clients and your established ones. If we're destroying the growth engine, then why does the hair seem so resilient? Why does it look like it comes back? Why does it look like it heals? Why does it sometimes even look stronger in these spaces?
And really, long story short, it's because, guess what? Follicles are resilient. Evolution designed them to withstand injury, regenerate repetitively, and survive trauma. So the follicle is really a survival organ.
Oh, yeah.
In mammals, the hair will protect from heat, cold, UV radiation, and abrasions. So the follicles evolved a backup system to keep them functioning. So they're always there to protect, but also they're made to regenerate and to heal themselves.
Yeah, and then unlike the other organs of the body that remain kind of structurally consistent, follicles rebuild themselves from scratch every cycle. Each anagen is a brand new construction project. So if your job is to rebuild hundreds of times in a lifetime, you become really good at repairing injury.
Right.
So when we think about this, multiple regenerative structures, which means that equals some multiple backup systems, right? This is where electrologists really need that precision portion of it. The follicle has multiple structures that can restart or support growth in this space. So we think about the bulge, which is like your master stem cell reservoir. The outer root sheath, it's a secondary germinative structure. And then we have the matrix. This is the mitotic. We were laughing because I say the word wrong every time. Factory, and the dermal papilla, which is the signaling hub. And many mammals, even a secondary germ cell that can restart the antigen space there.
So it's redundant by design. Each structure has overlapping functions. So if one of them is damaged, then another one can compensate, which is why it's so hard to kill, right? So
same girl, same.
Huh?
I said same girl, same.
Yeah, right. And that's why partial treatments don't produce good results. So the follicle is capable of working around incomplete destruction.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine that the follicle is sitting inside a little biological bunker. So you have the connective tissue sheath, you have collagen layers, you have sebaceous structures, blood vessels, nerves, immune cells, and erectropili muscle. And all of these will buffer after injury.
And so then when electrolysis like creates the heat or the lye, then the follicle is taking that damage, but most of the surrounding tissue then absorbs it. It protects it. It distributes the energy. A lot of times, that's one of those like common misunderstandings in our industry is we're controlled trauma, right? But like when we think about this, a lot of people think that like the damage being done is being done to the hair and not the structure in which creates the hair in that space. Yeah.
I did a talk, and it's actually a home study. It's the tissue injury one.
Yes.
And I go into the mechanism of skin healing, which I think is really important for us to understand because we talk about cell turnover, right? So we've all learned in school about the epidermis layer, kind of, how it regenerates, right? From the basal layer to the corneum. But where we're doing most of our damage happens to be in the dermis. And so following injury, it's really important to understand like what mechanisms kind of get triggered in order to kick off this regeneration. The body, really what it comes down to is just really good at repairing damage. And so even with us going in there and obliterating parts of the follicle, if you leave just parts of a structure alive enough, guess what? Full hair comes
if you
back.
built it,
See you later.
Yeah,
that's right.
And the hair cycle itself is a repair mechanism. That's exactly, its life cycle is doing just that. So when we think about like your anagen being your active growth cycle, your catagen is like its controlled breakdown. So this is like when it starts to like say, I don't really need that nurturing anymore, right? And then the telogen is that rest and rebuild phase of your growth cycle. The follicle is expecting that injury and they built it to survive it, which is quite lovely.
And then in the anagen, that's the reconstruction phase. So every new anagen gives follicles a chance to rebuild, even if prior cycles were damaged. So anytime that you're clearing out the follicle, this is a chance for new hair, new life, new growth.
Oh, yeah.
Stem cells, by the way, don't activate all at once. So we talked about the different structures that had stem cells present, and there's different types of stem cells in different organs in different parts of the body and also different stages of your life. But the stem cells actually just wait in reserve. So even if you destroy the papilla, the bulge still has the blueprint. If you destroy the bulge, the outer root sheath can still regenerate the lining. If you damage the outer root sheath, the papilla can still signal. So there's a lot of different things and they all work together, but this is kind of, we talked about the triangle of, what did we call it last time?
What do we call that? We were like, we had a clever name for it. Oh my gosh. Now we don't know it. It was like the trilogy of,
something
like that. Was it about like, I feel like it was about baseball or something, and I don't know anything about baseball. And we kept calling
Well,
it.
mine's a lot more
three strikes.
doom
That's what
and
it was.
gloom. I was like the triangle of death. What did we call it?
It was the 3 strikes.
The strike zone. That's right.
The 3
That's
strike
right.
zone.
Baseball
Like,
analogy sounds a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, man, we're really bad at that. We come up with something clever. Forget about clever.
That's right.
What you were saying about like each part kind of like signaling the next part, and like you gotta like hit them all, right? And so, I mean, this is why electrolysis results are cumulative. When you're wearing down a system with multiple backups, the girl's gonna back up. Like it will survive. So that's my opinion.
So hormones are also constantly signaling, right? So we obviously see people with hormonal issues quite a bit because of the nature of the work that we do. But like the face, the chest, the abdomen, those are highly hormone receptive zones. And hormones in those areas or in your bodies can fluctuate on a daily basis. So new hairs popping up during treatment doesn't mean treatment's failing. It could just mean that your biology is just really active on overdrive. You're creating quite a bit of androgen hormones maybe, and it's just wanting the hairs to be there, that's for sure.
It kind of reminds me of our patients that are hypertrichosis, not paradoxical hypertrichosis, but our hypertrichosis patients, that basically their body is just really good at showing off hairs, not because of hormones, but because genetically they were built different, if we're going to call it that. And that was to build hairs that needed, and often if you look at it, it's usually like a regional thing. Like you can kind of track who's kind of growing that extra hair typically. And in the same space, those same areas are more prone to hirsutism within those assigned female at birth because they're already prone to hypertrichosis. So it's like our body is really smart and it does what it's going to do very efficiently, very early on.
It's worth mentioning too that when it comes to hormone stimulation and hair growth, it's sure elevated levels of certain hormones can translate to excessive hair growth. But there's a factor that's even more important, and that's the follicle sensitivity to the hormones themselves. So you can encounter clients, right, that have higher testosterone levels, but are not hairy. And then there are others that have normal levels, right, quote unquote, whatever that means. But they're, so their labs are showing everything's normal, but all of a sudden, like they have that hypertrichosis superfluous hair.
Oh, yeah. And it's frustrating because like when we think about this, like follicle destruction taking multiple cycles, like it's a slow process. It's very arduous. Biology in itself is typically fairly slow. Humans don't mature as fast as other mammals out there. And so it takes our body a little while to kind of catch up that we're trying to shift things there. But we need those multiple growth cycles to consistently work to disable the mechanisms that then create the regeneration. So you need it to target the matrix, target the papilla, target the bulge, target the outer root germ system. Without that, it's like, because it's so good at slowly rebuilding a system, it also works against us because patients aren't patient when it comes to a slow process in itself. Yeah.
That's right. And yes, I mean, that's the reason why we quote that 12 to 18 months. It is scientifically valid. We're working with a system that expects trauma and rebuilds itself. And we've talked about how different structures can compensate for injury in one. And so they're like, okay, heal yourself. I'm taking over. And so it takes time to make sure that we're destroying everything, but also not doing, so much damage that we're also blowing through a huge amount of the dermis and then causing permanent scarring, right? So it's about the balance of things.
Oh, yeah. I think it matters for a hair removal expert, electrologist specifically in this space, is because patients have to grow out hair. And so they have to understanding what's happening with their hair and understanding the cycles of growth and understand what's happening hormonally behind the scenes or genetically behind the scenes all impacts everything. So when you think about it, understanding like the follicle's resistance to treatment, it allows you to understand as a technician to stop blaming yourself for biology doing what biology is going to do, right? And for the patient to stop blaming you because it's not you getting the job taking forever, right? Mm-hmm. It is the fact that we are working within a system that needs time for destruction to happen. We had this great conversation a couple of weeks ago in the classroom, and I brought it up last week, but right before Thanksgiving holiday, I had a visiting electrologist, and that was a comment about like, back in the day when she initially went to school 20 years ago when we did, right? She felt as though electrolysis was more permanent, faster. And there is a level of truth to that statement, but it was not more permanent, faster without trauma.
It was aggressive. It was just more aggressive.
It was aggressive. And that's what we were seeing. The price it took was the quality of care that you were doing to the skin to make that happen, because biology was going to work real hard to counter that. And you had to hit it hard so that you had higher patient satisfaction with less treatment early on. And so I think I think that when we start explaining that to a client, the reason it takes time is not only biology, but because we do a ballet, not the needle, right? We do a ballet of dancing with their hair growth cycles, understanding what's going on there, understand the destruction of that follicle, and making sure that
just enough collateral damage that we get the strike zone in there, but not so much that we're destroying a bunch of tissues, surrounding tissues and things like that. So yeah.
Absolutely. So difficult. It's important to say that like, don't blame yourself because of biology, but if there's something you can improve upon, like your treatment timing, like understanding the grow out process for your patients, like understanding what's happening hormonally behind the scenes. That's why taking continuing education is really important, especially in spaces that are allied to us, to understand how they interact with a follicle.
That's right. And clients can stop blaming the timeline, right? So hair isn't resilient because electrolysis didn't work. It's resilient because humans are evolved to survive. I actually make a pretty good mention of that during my consultations, and because I show the diagram of the pilosebaceous unit, and I'll point to the walls of the follicle, and I'll say, you have a bunch of cells here that line up the walls of the follicle. And obviously the thicker, deeper, stronger the hair, the more cells there are. And I'll explain that I go in and I destroy and I try to kill the cells that line this follicle. But if I leave one even alive enough, then the whole follicle regenerates. And so the bigger your target, the harder it is to be one and done. The smaller the target, the easier it is. And we'll tend to see success on, a cleanup, like a client coming in and you clear once, let's say one treatment. And then you can judge the regrowth. It's going to be a lot easier to be one and done when the hairs are structurally smaller.
This episode is sponsored by the Shields Foundation. Our mission is to make electrology education accessible by providing safe, affordable student housing and scholarships for underserved communities. Together, we're building a future where every student has the resources to succeed. Join us in supporting tomorrow's electrologists at shieldsfoundation.com.
And so we see that with like peach fuzz, right? And like certain accelerated growths, but on the smaller side of the spectrum. Then if you have your cases with your super thick, terminal deep hairs, don't be surprised that it's going to take you a couple times to be able to do it. Unless you decide that you just don't care what the skin looks like and you're just going to blast through the whole area, right? And then end up with at best, a 1-star review. At best.
At best. Well, and like we think about it, when you're saying like when the structure of the follicle is weak, right? Yeah. It is easier to achieve the permanence in that space than when the structure is a stronger one. But I would go a step further in my brain cells here and say that doesn't mean that you'll get done faster, because if a client is more focused on peach fuzz, think about removing the hairs from an actual peach. Yeah. It's daunting, right? When you're dealing with terminal growth, anything better than the terminal growth all over your face is an improvement, right? That's how I look at it.
One thing that I tend to mention, and I actually just Googled it because I was curious that if I said what I said was correct. But in the beginning, we talked about how the human body has about 5 million hair follicles. You know
Mhm.
who, what else has 5 million hair follicles?
What?
Chimpanzees.
Oh, yeah. Nah.
And
I didn't even
so,
think about animals. Yeah.
but think about it. A chimpanzee, most of those hair follicles have developed or converted into fully terminal hair roots.
Yeah.
So technically, we have the capacity of looking like that. I mean, think about, the Wolfman syndrome, for example.
Exactly. Mhm.
And so this is where something just kind of went a little wonky. And then every hair follicle was able to not only grow a hair, but also grow it into terminal. So when a client's coming in for all that peach fuzz and they're looking into the mirror in their car and they're just seeing some of the longer ones, and you look, especially if you have a good magnification, and you just see, like an endless sea of tiny, tiny, tiny little peach fuzz. And I'm not talking about the ones that might be like 2 millimeters in length. I'm talking about there's a little undercoat that's even smaller than that. It's really hard to see. But
Yes.
we are covered in hairs. Covered.
Yes.
And so sometimes because you don't see it, you don't quite realize, but it's there and it has the potential. Most of us will never experience full chimpanzee hair pelt, but we have the capacity, which is scary.
Well, and think about functionality. A chimpanzee is not thinking about wearing clothing, right?
Mhm.
Our bodies, I would say, if we really think about like early civilization, early man, even the way our body presents hair now has made adaptations to how we live day to day, down to how our skin receives the sun and how those cells handle damage, or taking that a step further and being like, okay, well, early civilization, you wouldn't have as long of a life, right? So you wouldn't think of how your skin would preserve past, say, 35 years old, right? And so now we are seeing an evolution. One of my favorite things is the evolution of the grandma, because we typically live longer. People assign female at birth than people assign male at birth. And part of that is like we literally, most other species only survive till just past having their youth, right?
Mhm.
And so if you think about it, we evolved AFAB individuals who are seeking out hair removal for unwanted hair past the point of what was initial to humans, right? And so now we have youth, we have middle age, we have advanced age, and they're even saying, the BBC just did this. Sorry, this is a cool tangent, but it is a tangent nonetheless. They were just saying that they've been studying brains for a while now, and development of a brain is no longer considered the 23 as mature adult.
Yeah, I did see that. It was like 35 or something, wasn't it?
I was like, I was like,
oh my God, must we be immature until 35 years old? What's the world coming to?
I've done what I needed to do. I behaved what I needed to behave.
But another thing that they said that evolutionarily is actually going to be maybe woven out, and we're not probably, you can drop that. We're not going to see that. It's going to be millions of years, but they say body hair. So there might be a point in human history, if we're still around, that body hair is not going to be really something that we see much of anymore. And so electrologists might actually not have a job.
Well, I'll find something new to do.
Again, we will be here for that.
I'll find a new hobby. I'll be haunting the hairs, any non-existent hairs of the past or future.
Right. So Melissa said that she likes the comparison with the chimpanzee. She'll find a way to incorporate that with clients. It gives them a good, everybody's seen how hairy a chimp can be. So it gives you a good idea as to how bad it could be.
Oh my gosh. I felt that way when I had my hair problem. And I would take a moment and just sit with that and be like, you know what? But we're not as bad as we could have been.
That is true.
We're not as bad as we could have been.
Let's deepen a little bit with the original answers into the discussion. So one of her first questions was, can the outer root sheath create new follicles? And again, this kind of touches on exactly what we said. No, humans cannot create new follicles after birth. We've got the 5 million when we're born, and that's kind of what stays. Yeah. And then the outer root sheath has regenerative functions, right? So we're building the lining, repairing the wall structures, but it cannot generate a new follicle. So we have to be very intentional. It can generate a new hair, not a new follicle in that space. The ability exists even in fetal, or
that ability exists only in fetal development. So like when we think about this, your only time that you can generate a new follicle, not hair, is during fetal development. It is once the fetus has passed that point, you got what you got.
That's right. Whether they're dormant or not.
Yep.
And clients often will misinterpret this because they see new hairs. And so what they're seeing really, though, is hormonal activation. It's thickening of the existing follicles, or it's dormant follicles that are reawakening or awakening for the first time. So the follicle was there, but there's something that triggered the hair growth on that follicle. And now suddenly, boom, there's your hair.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually what I tell clients as somebody who is formerly hairy, right? If you have the propensity to grow hair that is in mass, more unwanted than it is wanted, right? We might be chasing that throughout your lifetime if your body is already coded to do so. I think that it helps people understand, electrologists and patients, the difference between activation and creation. It's the creation of a follicle is there. The activation of its ability to grow hasn't happened. And it could just take the right bad day to make that shift in a way that they don't want it.
A little too much stress, a certain medication, hormone fluctuation. I mean, you name it. There's so many things.
Yeah. So from there, the question was like, are we removing the outer root sheath when we extract the hair? And so no, the outer root sheath, it stays in under the skin, right? It was the inner root sheath we had to talk about in that space.
So what people think is the outer root sheath is usually degenerated inner root sheath material. So we might have like that sheath that we see on the hairs, right?
Yes.
It could be keratin debris. It could be coagulated proteins. It could be sebum, and it could be club membranes. So there's lots of different things that, anatomically we see when we pull a hair out. But outer root sheath, is lining of the follicle wall itself. And so that structure stays in. Although I should say the little caveat. Have you ever turned a follicle inside out like a little sock, by accident?
Oh, yeah. Oops.
That's a
Yes,
little different. Yeah. There, I think that we're seeing the actual outer root sheath, but that's not normal.
No, you should not be removing the sock.
Yeah, exactly. Like you pull it out and all of a sudden it just flips inside out, but it's very much connected. Yeah, that's a different situation.
It actually reminds me of I have my favorite pair of sweatpants I wear to when I'm working out. And every time, I don't know why I haven't learned my lesson yet. When I go to remove them, I never remove my socks first. I just kind of remove everything, right? And every time I have this little beep sock that kind of sticks out the bottom of that little elastic band.
Although
that's exactly it.
I use this analogy a lot in school when they're asking, sometimes you pull the hair out and the pore might be a little tight and it scrapes the inner root sheath off in that pore. And this, you can grab it with a tweezer and it comes right off. And so they're like, why does that happen? It's well, let's take when you take off skinny jeans with socks on.
Yep, exactly.
So that's exactly what happens. The pore is tight. It's scraped off that little jelly sac, which is, that's not outer root sheath.
No.
But yeah.
And if you truly remove the outer root sheath, you'd be removing part of the follicle is what we're trying to say, which doesn't happen, hopefully, without injury in that space.
So question 3 was, do we destroy germinative cells? And the answer is yes. That's really the foundation of everything we do. So permanent hair removal is the destruction of those germinative cells that are responsible for hair growth.
Oh, yeah. The goal is to denature the growth machinery. When we talked about the mechanisms, that's what I think about in that space. Outer root sheath germ cells, not cells, she shells. The bulge stem cells, right? The matrix cells, the papilla signaling cells, that's our target.
That's right. And when those systems fail together across multiple cycles, the follicle then cannot rebuild and permanent removal is achieved. We have success.
We have success.
That's right.
So we had some good questions actually come up because of last week. And then because Eileen sent one and then Melissa sent a follow-up one. I don't know about you, but I get all excited when you guys send me screenshots of questions you guys see online. So this morning I saw it and we're in the middle of, unfortunately, flood times here in our town. And so I had nothing but a deep dive to go down, looking at the questions that came through. So thanks for that one.
So the question was, can insufficient energy make a hair coarser?
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, yes. Partial destruction can trigger repair responses, and it can lead to paradoxical hypertrichosis. So the same way that laser causes this, but laser causes it on a much bigger scale.
Oh, yeah. Your quarter size versus the filament size.
Exactly. And so, but yes, I mean, like undertreating, consistently undertreating just triggers it enough that the body's going to be like, let me make this a little bit stronger so that next time we can withstand this. And so, yes, it can.
I think that one thing that when I saw the question, and I'm actually going to pull up the question from the text that came through, but there was a part of this, and it just said, is it possible for coarse hairs, if the energy is insufficient, for partial follicle damage within a certain modality of flash or thermolysis? One of the things that I think about in this space is it comes down to how do we word things? Because insufficient energy means that you have not provided that follicle enough to epilate a hair with the entireties of the surrounding inner root sheath on the exterior of that hair. There was not enough balance of energy. It's not low levels that do it. So insufficient does not mean low levels, because some people, their bodies are going to be more respondent to epilation at a lower intensity, longer timing, lower intensity, yada, yada, yada. Like our bodies receive energy differently. In fact, every body receives the ohms differently, even within electrolysis itself, because we're little electrical units. And so I think that what's important for people to note is, once again, back to how we say something, because that is part of this. So if you're saying insufficient for the idea, like that's sort of like, yes, but, right? Do you mean insufficient, like we didn't provide enough and we're plucking it, or just undertreating it, causing just enough damage to not really create that heat barrier that we talk about within thermolysis, especially that cooking point, essentially, of the follicle? When the injury is incomplete, the follicle will respond with increased shaft diameter, darker pigmented, faster regrowth, distortion, and stronger like anagen entry, like a stronger growing point in that space. So when it's incomplete, you're not going to kill the hair, but you can't kill the hair in one session anyway. So technically our job in itself typically is an incomplete part of the process, unless all of the things line up nicely. So are you saying less heat in general? Is the next part of that question I would do.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we can definitely do a little bit more clarification as to what do you mean by undertreating. The situation I was talking about before would be like heat's too low and I pluck the hair out. Like that's the different type of undertreating. If it's just undertreating as in I partially destroyed part of the follicle and I was able to remove the hair and seamlessly, right? There wasn't really anything attached. But I did not every part of the follicle, not every cell within that follicle was treated to the full potential that we would need for permanent cell death, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to find it when we talked about this last week. What happens when we do partial destruction of each structure in the strike zone.
Yep.
You know, we had about 70 pages of text, so it might be a little bit difficult to find.
That was so funny. We went a little crazy in our research last week. I think that while you're looking that up, it's like pruning a plant incorrectly. It stimulates more vigorous growth, right? Me with all my little plant babies, it's like I go up to them and I prune them all the time because I want them to be more luxurious, right? But you're doing just enough to be able to then send the nurturing where it needs to go. I think that it's important for people to remember that this is why technique and precision truly matter far more than just like raw intensity or raw, like unchecked power. Because unchecked power is not about taking your understanding of electrolysis energies, right? It's saying, to heck with them. I'm just going to go as hard as possible because the client asked me for the dead hair, right? So I think that's really important in that spot. Did you find it?
I did not, but that just
did
means
not.
that you're all going to have to just go watch last week and then, report back.
I'm like, seems like a you problem. Just kidding. We'll have to listen to it again.
Right?
There was a really cool part in the Hinkle book
Found
that
it.
did have the drawings that he did when he talks about the different types of epilation of the hair and how it will look in the end.
Yes.
That kind of gives you a good understanding of what you should be removing. I would love to see those as pictures eventually, not just a drawing, so that, because sometimes when students are like thinking like, well, what is this? And you're trying to explain it and like, it's wispy over here, or it looked like this, or it felt like this. And like, so sometimes it's like, I would love to see
Just
those
a picture book of nothing but follicles.
Yeah, it's fine.
We can make it for your
My
your
only
coffee table.
follicles.
You know, yeah, only follicles. Yeah, we'll make it for people's coffee tables.
I told my students that's how I'm going to do the build out of the new office. I'm just going to have an only follicles account. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to make it. So it's just us epilating hairs really smoothly with like nice juicy sheaths on them, all that gelatinous material.
Yeah, right. I mean that draws a crowd. It's like the pimple popping videos, you know? People love that stuff. For sure.
Trust, that's going to be the app.
The Electrology Education Coalition has a wide variety of home study courses. Want to keep learning on your own time? We have a growing library of home study courses covering advanced techniques, ethics, business planning, and more. Earn CEUs, stay sharp, and continue building your skills. Explore the catalog at electrologycoalition.com.
So here's our little spiel from last week to talk about like partial destruction. So we talked about the three, right? So there's the bulge, there's the outer root sheath, and there's the dermal papilla.
Yes.
So if we destroy just one zone, great, right? You can slow down or distort growth. And we've all seen this, you know, like right on the cusp of going down a stair step and seeing a reduction in hair growth, you tend to have an appointment or two where all the hairs are just distorted and barely inside the skin. You know what I'm talking about? As soon as I see an appointment like that, and it's nothing but just like small little distorted nubs of hairs, I'm like, we're about to change your appointments. Like you're just right at the cusp of being able to change the treatment plan. Let me know in the chat, by the way, if you know what I'm talking about. So I think that's great. When I see it, I'm actually kind of excited because I'm like, okay, we're seeing progress right here, right now.
Yeah.
So
they're like weak. They're
yeah, exactly. They're trying. I still zap them because they still had cells. They still grew. So if you still grew, you still die. But even that aside, you know, it's kind of cool to see. So you disable just one zone. You slow down and distort the growth. You disable two, you'll dramatically weaken or miniaturize the hair. This is what we tend to talk about, right? So the hair will come back thinner, finer, lighter, blah, blah, blah. But if you do all three, then the hair can't recover, permanently gone. So sometimes it's like we're kind of in zone 1, zone 2, right? So we might be able to do 1, maybe 2 zones. We tend to be there because it's controlled trauma. We're trying not to overdo it. We don't want to blast through the skin and make holes or anything like that. But sometimes everything's going to be perfect, right? And so I always assume that there's some insertions that I'll do that will just be spot on. And then those hairs, I did all 3 zones at the same time. It's not growing back. It accounts for maybe 5 to 10%, maybe 10%, depending on depends on the thickness of the hair for sure. Yeah. But you can definitely have some one and dones.
I definitely think that the one and dones exist out there as well. And I've seen it on my table. It is less frequent than the others. Like when she says 5 to 10%, it's probably pretty.
That's for like a thick hair. Like it could be like 50 to 75% sometimes when it's peach fuzz and that sort of thing. Yeah. So it can definitely vary.
It definitely, it will vary. And it is something that it's talked about. People are like, oh, I can kill a hair in one session. It's like, probably 5 to 10% of them. Yeah, sure. I would say so. And if it's more than that, I would like to know your ways. Like, tell me your ways. So,
great one. Yes.
Great one. So insertion, this was another great question that we had. So should insertion depth be based on the visible sheath in this space?
So I'm reading over this answer here and I'm thinking, you know, yes, the insertion, it should be based on where the dermal papilla sits in the skin. And so if you read some of the old textbooks, right, there's going to be depth gauge, which is something that you essentially treat or pluck out a hair right at the base, and you grab it right at the base of the skin, and then you just put it up next to your probe, line the tip of your probe to the bulb of your hair, and then see kind of where it sits. And then that's the depth of maybe if you picked a nice anagen, like late anagen hair, that's about as deep as you're going to go in most of your insertions. The root sheath, the inner root sheath itself, and this is where Stephanie and I kind of have a pin in, like, we're going to need to do more research on this because we're kind of not agreeing, not her and I, but
not yet. We're not agreeing with the research we found. Yeah.
Because they're trying to say that the inner root sheath isn't visible on hair, and I disagree. So if it's not, then what is it? So we'll see. I mean, the root sheath itself, if you just say the inner root sheath is that little jelly sheath that encompasses maybe the bottom 2/3 of the hair, then you need to do insertion should always be down to the bulb or the root of the hair. So no matter where the sheath is, I think that the sheath is just kind of there depending. It's like helps with this like structure of the hair, nutrition of the hair, and all these sorts of things. But it's not really an insertion guide, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I would say that when we say the depth of that, so like the depth of your dermal papilla area, when you insert down, you have your dimpling towards the base of the follicle and pulling back by 10%, that dimple down is telling you where your last space is, but really that 10% pull back, you're still right where you needed to be. You're just no longer dimpling. And this is putting your point effect within that bottom 2/3 range within your destruction of the follicle. It's when you always hit the bottom of it and you're on let's say a deep set terminal hair, insulated filament, thermolysis, traditional insulation, not the IBL. Okay. Then I would say objectively, unless you're doing displacement, it will be difficult for you to guide your heat in the proper space it would need to be if you're always going just for the dimple and staying at the dimple without retracting that little bit so the dimple pops back.
You have to relax the dimple back. Because think about this too, as soon as you apply current, you're destroying the bottom of the follicle, the skin will bounce back, your probe is now below the hair follicle.
Yep.
So if you're pulsing more than once, you're probably missing your target more often than not. I agree.
Yeah. And it's like, so sometimes when people hear like, oh, I had to hit the base, I have to hit that dimple every time. I'm like, hit the dimple.
But then pull it back.
Pull it back. Like
make the skin flat again.
Yep. I just want a little flatness. Like, and that 10% is a pretty sweet spot because it's going to give you, if you're on a traditional ITH or insulated probe, it's going to give you your point effect within that terminal hair in a range that will give you a nice, good teardrop, right? That's what we're talking about. It's different in your galvanic, okay? Because your galvanic, that gas, that the bubbles that you don't want to see spill over, the bubbles that we always talk about spilling over, right? It expands into distortion. And so the reason that it's favorable for a lot of technicians that want to target distortion is that they're saying, I don't want to move my filament. I don't want to do displacement. I want to sit right there and allow the lye to get where I couldn't. Yeah. I'm going to push back on that because as a technician that does a lot of blend and galvanic, you still need to have an accurate insertion. And so you shouldn't be waiting for it to get there, because if we want to get that 3 components, right, in our 3 strikes, right? If we want to get that third component, how do you do that without countering properly? And so it's not about having a less than accurate insertion. Sure, can you still get the lye to a lot of places? Yeah, but you could also create a lot more damage just pushing that lye there without creating that movement needed within that space.
I mean, same with electrolysis. If you're just going to be in the collateral tissue around the follicle, there's moisture there. It's just going to start creating lye in places you don't need it, So,
right.
I mean, one of the reasons why multineedle galvanic is as successful as it is because of time. I mean, it's low intensity, but it's because you're in the follicle for so long that the lye is going to reach where it needs to reach, So
absolutely.
I don't disagree that it's a very effective method.
Yeah.
But, it's just different. But
the reason you don't get lye spillover in that space is when we talk about that low intensity over time is you don't have time. It's like trying to boil your water. Okay. But you're putting it on a low setting and waiting for it to warm, right? so that time is getting that pot to warm, but you're not working in warming, you're working chemical destruction. So it's like, you need to understand that like it is the time that gets that destruction of that done, because the intensity needed to do so within a single needle galvanic would have to be in milliamps versus microamps, and would have to be more intense for a shorter duration in that space. Michaela asked a great question. Can you pulse at the bulge and then at the papilla? I would say yes. For myself, I would not do that within synchro.
So yeah, I mean, it's watch the skin at all times, you know?
Right.
And so synchro though was developed, what she's talking about is like the movement from papilla to bulge, that if you read through the Dectro manual on the synchro technique, they're specific about using the ITHs, right? So an insulated probe, coupe ballet, whatever. And you go down to the dermal papilla, and then as you press on the pedal, you retract the probe.
Yeah.
So there's a movement from papilla to bulge. Essentially, it kind of comes down to both the same thing. So when you're talking about doing displacement, right, which is the first part of the question, pulse at bulge and, you know, dermal papilla, whatever order you want to do it, you're essentially targeting the bottom 2/3 of the follicle. There was a talk that I did years ago that was about efficiency with electrolysis. And so how do you see better clearances and, you know, faster clearings and better work and all of this, is that you have to think about that strike zone, those three things you're trying to destroy, and make sure that every insertion you're doing that. If you're using a insulated ITH or ballet insulated or whatever else, and you have a deep terminal hair and you're inserting down to the dermal papilla, the insertion was spot on, right? You're exactly where you need to be. You pulse once, it's going to destroy that area there, part of the outer root sheath that lays at the bottom of the follicle. The dermal papilla was destroyed. The hair will release. But are we targeting the 3 strike zones here? And the answer is no. And so what we're going to see is miniaturizing of the hair and regrowth. Now, what if you did displacement and you moved your follicle, your probe, your filament up the follicle a little bit? You did a second pulse, and this pulse targeted outer root sheath and the bulge area. Now you've just increased the chances of you getting all 3 zones in one insertion. 2 pulses, but 1 insertion. If you're doing synchro and you're doing that motion, it depends on the timing. The synchro usually is about a quarter of a second. It might be enough time, but you got to time your movement correctly, because a quarter of a second's over quick. And it has to be with a TH probe, because if you use a BL or non-insulated, you're changing the depth of insertion, the amount of exposure on that probe, you risk over-treating, especially near the top of the skin. So all of it kind of works. And, you know, like I've done 2 pulses with synchro, but you got to keep it low. Synchro's hot. So got to be careful with what you're doing. You just always have to think about, you know, in 3D, in color, in HD, or 4K now we are. What does the coagulation area look like? And did you get every structure that you're supposed to?
Oh, yeah. And I would say in that scenario, yes, if you're targeting multiple zones and you're moving with a traditional ITH or insulated probe, then working within that synchro is fine. And I would go as far as to say that, just so everybody knows, I almost always displace. I almost always move my filament.
But you also use ballet insulated almost exclusively.
I know I use everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I use, especially once, of course we have insulated probes at the school and that kind of stuff. But as a technician, that I do know how to work with a gold and a stainless in perfect scenario. Okay. So for example, if I can't get an insulated probe with ballet, I didn't have a ProTech or a Sterex or a Puma, right? If I didn't have an insulated probe in office, I know how to adjust my levels to counter that heat distribution in the follicle.
It's perfectly normal to be able to work, like you should be able to work with non-insulated probes. I mean, there's a point effect with thermolysis no matter what. So it doesn't mean that because you have a non-insulated probe, boom, you know, you're automatically scarring the skin. I don't want people to think that. Obviously, insulated probes were developed, you know, with protection of the epidermis in mind. And so it makes things a lot more easy to use, but it doesn't mean that that's the only tool you have. And that's a good follow-up question here. And so I was going to touch on that next, but you can go ahead. So we talked about displacement, going deep and then moving to a little bit more shallow so we can treat the bottom 2/3 and get all 3 strike zones. So Michaela asks, so even with the vellus hair on the upper lip, for example?
Well, I wouldn't be doing the same method of
here's my
ZAP.
question then, Michaela. Are all 3 strike zones present on a vellus hair on the upper lip? Okay. So she said no. And so you've kind of answered your question, right? So we're treating a hair in a different phase of its life. And so that means that we have to adapt our technique. So we will go, if it's a fine hair, it's a shallow insertion. Will you be doing displacement on a shallow insertion?
No.
You know,
you don't even have anything to displace.
Exactly.
I'm here.
Displacement means I'm out of the follicle.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. So yeah, but that's good. You know, we just have to kind of think about, like, again, our strike zones, what's available, what's present with whatever insertion we're doing. We're operating blind, right? Because it's under the skin. So a lot of this is just us making educated guesses.
Oh yeah. Celeste also says, what about multiplex? Do I like displacement, or do we like displacement with 2 pulses? If so, TH or BL preference for deep, dry hair with a Protect. Personally, multiplex, I'm going to go in IBL, deep, dry hair. So I'm dealing with a terminal growth. It's dry. So I like the multiplex in this space because personally, that's going to give me more of a manual thermolysis side of things. So it's going to give you that low, slow current for a long duration. Okay. Or low current for a long duration. I said the same thing twice. You're welcome. And then I would say from there, if it's deep, dry hair, I will add on that I would not select multiplex for a deep, dry hair as a first clearance. I would go more than likely synchro, and then on regrowth, go multiplex, because I'm going to have a better time doing a first time clearance, because if it's already dry, there is not much moisture I'm going to be pulling from that surrounding tissue on a first-time clearance. Multiplex, I look at as a secondary option to blend. So for me, I look at it as I would go flash or laser as my first clearances. I would go multiplex or blend on my second pass through, and I would go galvanic or manual thermolysis, slow energy, real slow, for those who can't do galvanic. And that's how my brain says it, because of how I want to then target it. Yeah. Because she's weird. She likes to play with all the toys.
So I think that kind of wraps it up for today, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So next week, we still have one more before you leave, or is next week when you leave? Oh my goodness. And then she's leaving us for another country.
That's
right. For a little while. Awesome. Well, next week we'll see you guys on here. I promise that if there's any more flooding in my area that we're at right now, that I will find a boat and I will stay dry.
Find a canoe.
I'm going to find a canoe. But that's it for tonight. Thanks, guys. I mean, this was Melissa.
Yeah. And thank you, Melissa. Honestly,
Melissa.
Your questions were great. I mean, we built 2 episodes on this, so this was great. And I think that it's questions that everybody has, right? And everybody kind of wants to ask and maybe doesn't think about asking. And so keep them coming, honestly.
I think that a lot of it, I know that we have a minute or two. I think a lot of it is that people, you don't know what you don't know, right? But in that same space, a lot of people are afraid to ask questions. I want you guys to lean in and understand that asking questions is honestly the coolest thing we see as educators. Is it means that your mind is open to continuously growing the science behind what we do.
Yeah.
Bring it.
And honestly, us researching these, we learn stuff, which is great.
Yeah. I was excuse me, what's this poorly written thing about the inner sheath? I was like,
Oh, I know. We're going to be arguing about this. So
you're going to see me on the internet angry typing. I'm just like, I'm so much faster than. All right.
Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next week for our last episode of 2025. And then it's happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.
Next week, bring your goals for 2026. I want to see those dropped in the chat next week, because I want to build a conversation about that goal setting again.
Yeah, we did that 2024. Should revisit 2024's goal setting and see what if anything was accomplished, if you guys wrote them down.
Oh, I like that. Absolutely. All right.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone. Have a great evening.
If tonight's episode expanded your understanding, let us know. Send your questions, your aha moments, and then the topics you want us to dive into next.
And if you're joining our mentorship hour or following along on our research committee, this is exactly the kind of conversation shaping the future of electrology.
Until next time, stay curious, stay consistent, and keep mastering your craft.